Hello, and welcome back to the Starting 5 video series. My name's Adam Spencer. You can find me on Twitter at SDS Basketball or at AdamSpencer4 if you want to follow me for any hoops-related nonsense, some breakdowns, some game analysis, all that sort of stuff. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the current SEC Player of the Year rankings that I have. There are a lot of worthy candidates, but I'm going to say this right off the bat. I view the SEC Player of the Year a little differently than I know some people do, in that I think that it's important to be on a winning team. Obviously, the most important stat in basketball is team wins. If your team's not winning, even if you're having great numbers, you're still valuable and you're still a great player. But it's all about the wins to me, because to be the player of the year, you have to be on one of the better teams of the year. And that's just the way I see it. And I know that some people won't agree with that. So if you disagree with that, just know that this is the way that I'm doing my rankings, and you can adjust your reactions online accordingly. First up, we have a few honorable mentions. These are guys who didn't quite make the top 5, but who I still want to give a shout out to anyway, because they've been playing really well thus far. First, we've got John Fulkerson at Tennessee. Tennessee's a team with stars, so they don't have a ton of individual talent, but we'll get to another Tennessee player later on. Emmanuel Miller, Texas A&M. Severe Wheeler, Georgia. Tumani Kamara, Georgia. Trendon Watford at LSU. Scottie Pippen Jr. at Vanderbilt, and Iverson Molinar at Mississippi State. Those guys have all had fantastic seasons, but for one reason or another, they're not quite in the top 5 level. So let's get to the top 5, and starting with number 5, let's go with DJ Stewart Jr. out of Mississippi State. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I had Mississippi State picked to finish last in the SEC, and that looks like it was one of my worst takes of the year so far. The Bulldogs have actually been really exciting now that they've got Stewart playing alongside Molinar in their backcourt, and in a recent game against Mizzou, after an awful first half, Stewart just took over and led the Bulldogs to an impressive come-from-behind win that came from nowhere, it seemed. They were just lighting up Mizzou, and it was all because of Stewart, Molinar, and that backcourt. But Stewart is averaging 18.8 points, 3.7 rebounds, 2.4 assists, and he's shooting 43% from behind the three-point line. He's a scoring machine, and he's a huge key to the success that the Bulldogs have had thus far. Plus, he's just a lot of fun to watch, and that's a big part of this too. It's just when you've got a guy who can take over a game the way he did in the second half against Mizzou, scoring 13 straight points for his team, that's incredible, and that's a guy who is worthy of a spot on this list. Heck, right now, Mississippi State's a double overtime loss against Kentucky away from being 3-0 in SEC play. I did not see that one coming. Number 4, we've got YVES PONS out of Tennessee. Now, I know a lot of you will think he should be higher, and he is by far the best defensive player in the SEC, maybe even the country. I've never seen anybody with such great help side instincts, and the bounce that he shows and just the timing of his ability to block any sort of shots is incredible. In the loss to Alabama, there was one point where he was sitting on the ground and just jumped up and blocked a shot. That was one of the craziest things that I've seen this year. But the reason that he's only number 4 on my list is because of his offense. It's just been stagnant. If anything, he's regressed from last year, and that's concerning to me. I know that Tennessee is a loaded team that has plenty of scoring options other than him. Victor Bailey Jr. has really stepped up into a scoring role. The freshman, Jaden Springer, the other freshman, Keon Johnson, Josiah Jordan-James, those guys are all playing really well, Santiago Vescovi. But PONS, I was really hoping to see a little bit more from him. The fact that through the 3rd game in the SEC season, he's only averaging 7.8 points per game, that's kind of disappointing to me. I'm also a little disappointed that he's only averaging 5.2 rebounds. I just think that he's capable of more, so I'm holding him to a higher standard, because I do think that he, even though he's playing at an SEC Defensive Player of the Year level, he's got to really jump forward in his offensive game if he's going to be in the SEC Player of the Year conversation come the end of the year. It's been a crazy year in the SEC. These next 2 spots, number 3 and number 2, are both occupied by freshmen. The first one, at number 3, Moses Moody out of Arkansas. I love his versatility. I love what he brings to the game. Even at such a young age, he's already stepped into a leadership role for the Hogs, and he's doing everything that they need him to do. That hasn't translated to a ton of success so far in SEC play, but I really think that Arkansas is going to get back on track, and if they do, he's going to be the leader. 15.9 points, 5.7 rebounds, 1.6 assists, 1.3 steals, and he's shooting above 40% from three-point range. That's versatility. He's doing it all for the Hogs. That team is very streaky, but Moody is the model of consistency. He's been great this year, and I'm excited to see how he does down the stretch. At number 2, I have the SEC's scoring leader, Cam Thomas, out of LSU, who's averaging 24.8 points per game. I'll say that again. He's averaging 24.8 points per game. That's incredible for a freshman, and he's doing it against SEC teams. This isn't like he was scoring 40 points a game against non-conference teams and is all of a sudden scoring a lot less against SEC teams. No, he's torching the nets against SEC teams, and LSU needs it in a bad way. The reason he's not number one is that scoring is really the only thing that he brings to the game. Yes, he scores in a variety of ways. He's decent from three-point range, knocking down a third of his shots from beyond the arc. He's also shooting 91% from the free throw line, and he went 15 for 16 from the line in a recent win in overtime against Georgia. That was huge, and that was a really clutch performance from a freshman, considering Trendon Watford, who I mentioned earlier, went 3 for 10 from the free throw line in that game. But again, the reason that I don't have him at number one is just when you only bring scoring to the table, you really got to do it at a high level to be in the Player of the Year discussion. Thomas is absolutely there, but to me, he's kind of like Carmelo Anthony, a prime Melo in the NBA. Melo won 1 scoring title. He's a 10-time All-Star, but he's never made an All-NBA first team, and he's never been the MVP. That's because to be the MVP, or in my opinion, to be the SEC Player of the Year, you have to have more of an all-around game, and he just hasn't shown that yet. There's a reason for that too, in that he doesn't have the ball in his hands. You know, James Harden scores at will in the NBA, but he's also a big assist man because he has the ball all the time, so he kicks it out to open teammates. When Cam Thomas gets the ball, he shoots. That's because that's the way the LSU offense runs, and they already have a point guard in Javonte Smart, who's really good himself. So while Thomas fills his role, I think that the LSU offense is hurting his chances to be the SEC Player of the Year. So we'll see how his role develops as the year continues. But again, I'm really excited about the way he's playing. He's my SEC Freshman of the Year frontrunner right now, I would say. So that brings us to number one. Who's number one? Who's left? This has been a weird year, and there's a lot of worthy players, but there's no one who's really standing out above the pack. But right now, as things stand in mid-January, I have Herb Jones out of Alabama as the SEC Player of the Year. This is what I thought YVES PONS was going to be this year. Herb Jones, second best defender behind PONS in the entire SEC. But he's taken that step forward as an offensive threat that I wanted to see from PONS and haven't yet. And again, he's not an elite scorer, but he's doing everything that Alabama needs him to do. He's even played point forward at times this year when Javon Quinterly's been out or struggling and benched. Here are his numbers: 12.4 points, 6.4 rebounds, 2.5 offensive rebounds per game, which is huge, 1.9 assists, 1.4 steals, 1 block per game. Then he's shooting 50% from threes, but we need to consider he only takes about 1.5 per game, and he's making 74% of his free throws, which, while not elite, is really good for a player who has struggled at the line in his past. In the win over Florida, that was a huge win for the Crimson Tide. Jones was even putting the ball on the floor, getting to the rim, making tough baskets, getting the and one. Simply put, he's been incredible. He's been everything that this team needs. I thought maybe John Petty Jr. would be in this spot this year. I thought maybe Jaden Shackelford would have a great sophomore campaign. I thought maybe Javon Quinterly would be in the mix here as a first-year player at Alabama, but it's been the Herb Jones show in Tuscaloosa this year. Those other guys have been great at times, but Herb Jones has been the consistent thread through all of Alabama's success. They're 3-0 in SEC play as I'm saying this right now. They've already got wins at Tennessee and at home against Florida. Those are incredible victories for any team in the SEC. And they're off to this hot start because Jones is leading the way. So for right now, based on that criteria that I said earlier about value and adding wins to your team, Herb Jones is the guy, hands down. We'll see how things progress as the SEC season continues on.